Welcome to Mind Meld, a podcast brought to you by Maz and Iman, a stream of consciousness, conversational style podcast with visionaries building the future of Web3. No topics are off limits.
Thank you, Songyi, for joining. Super excited to have this conversation. We met on actually the streets of Istanbul, I think, and had one of the most random conversations and really enjoyed meeting you. And as I was just saying before it started recording, anytime we chat, it goes into super deep technical, building on the edges, all the way to how do we actually kind of build a connection and community between everyone that surrounds us. And so I think you've captured all the different sides of where the space needs to go, and genuinely excited to continue this friendship as well and continue this conversation. So maybe just to kick it off, yeah, absolutely, welcome. To kick it off, I think it's always nice to just kind of give a little bit of context. This isn't a normal podcast, it's more of a conversation. And so it would just be nice to quickly kind of go over anything that might help the audience kind of understand the story of, like, as a builder that has been in this space for, I think, a very long time, and having seen it transform. Maybe to start off, how have you kind of entered the space, and how has the space developed over the time that you've been there, whether it's in good ways, bad ways, all the sides of it? Would love to hear that.
Yes. Thank you for having me, by the way, and really lovely to reconnect with Iman, and then nice to meet you, Maz. And it's always really intrigued by people who really want to share and then listen a story, and rather than a product, rather than the business and all that. And I think crypto space need more of a good story. So I'm very, very happy to be here and sharing my stories. So my name is Songyi. I am born and raised in Korea, but now I'm based in basically 3 different continents, Asia, Africa, and Oceania. I mean, New Zealand, I tried to fit that into Asia. It's kind of APAC, but some people like, come on. Yeah. So I'm trying. My story into crypto is a long story. It actually started in 2011. I first get to know about Bitcoin through my friends, which was like my ex-boyfriend. And hope he hears this. And first I was like very skeptical. And I asked him, like, what can you do with Bitcoin? And he's like, oh yeah, you can buy weapons, you can buy drugs. There is a dark web and a Silk Road. I don't know if you know those platforms, but I was like, wow, okay, that's quite interesting. And I didn't take it super seriously, but we were already mining stuff with our laptop, and it's a very, very early stage of all the development. But then it was like, how much was that? The Bitcoin was like $40. I think it was less than $100 back then. And I'm like, oh, this is too expensive. I think we're too late. That was the story of, kind of OG people. And then I was actually studying social work and working for a nonprofit organization, and always like really enjoy the work there. And I still believe there is a huge role for those nonprofit organizations to play. But then when I meet the people, the beneficiaries and people in my work, and also our colleague in the land, and I always feel like, there is something more to be done. And it's not just one way, but it has to be, interactive. Like it has to be circulating some sort of economy and finance, and the money has to go through. It's not like us giving money and they spending. And one day I was in West Africa, Mali, in a refugee camp, and I met a family. The husband was not there, and he was working in a Cote d'Ivoire, which is a neighbor country. And the mom was actually there with the 5 different kids, and not different. I mean, they're all different, but 5 kids, and living literally in a house that built out of trash. They were refugees. They had no ID, no bank, no Western Union, nothing. And I was interviewing because they were using local language. So we had a 2 translator, local language to French, French to English, and just doing interview and asking her life. And she was like, yeah, like I work like around like a neighborhood and who has an actual job and the people who live there. I go there, clean their house, I cook for them, I do things, and my kids just spending time in that refugee camp area. And I say, where's your husband? And he's, oh, he's working neighbor country. And I say, like, is he sending you money? How do you receive it? And she's like, yeah, he put money into the plastic bag, give it to somebody who's coming to my village, and that's how we get money. And I was like full in shock, like, oh, it shouldn't be that way. And then back then we were already using mobile banking, everything was on our thumb, and it was never an issue for me. And I was like, wow, this is interesting. But then they had this 2G phone and the solar panel charger, because they have no electricity. So the solar panel charger has like 6 different a cable, like different type of cable, and then they're charging their phone, and that's the only way they communicate. They don't even write and read, so they have their special code to communicate with their people. So it was a fascinating journey. And then when I came back, and I've done a lot of trips like this in the different parts of the world, and it stays with me for a few days, and then unfortunately, it's just my life goes on. So I don't really recall that. But this particular trip and this particular story just stuck with me for 2 weeks. And I woke up at night having a little bit of a nightmare. And I was like, there is something that we can do. And then all of a sudden, kind of Bitcoin narrative comes to me like, actually, they have a 2G phone and they have a network. And if we develop the way that people can send and receive Bitcoin without internet, that would be quite awesome. And then that kind of turned into the kind of first SMS wallet in the crypto space. And that was 2012, 2013, we launched. That kind of kicked off. And then we got invited to Silicon Valley. So we did like startup stuff. So I was like completely changing from the social worker, NGO worker, to like tech CEO in Silicon Valley doing Bitcoin stuff. And it was a crazy journey, and I learned a lot. And since then, I think the most important thing that opened to me through this crypto journey was really understanding the true value of the decentralization. And when we started, I never thought what we have right now is going to have it at this time. You know what I mean? So I thought, okay, what we have now, and people talking about Bitcoin, that there is a ETF like approved and things like that. I thought it's gonna happen, maybe not in my lifetime, but all of things happening and faster than I thought. It was quite interesting. And then going through a few cycles of market, and now I am very, very adaptive to the changes and what kind of players come in. And even today, some people were talking about, people were in ECC, they are discussing, they are not like totally decentralized, they're like centralized, and like we had to go this way and that way. And I'm like, guys, we're still growing our pie. We don't really need to judge. And they who are actually running centralized exchange, they're doing their job. And like for example, without Coinbase, we would probably not here, and then we should respect that. And so all of that, everybody has a space, and that kind of lead me to the new way of like organizing the governance, and a lot of this decentralized principle, and then the philosophy. It opened me up with a different way of understanding the world, and then different way of designing the system. And I'm still very excited. Like, although I've been here for 12 years, I can't believe it. But every day I have like excitement, either through people, either through project, either through different narrative, either through like reading very, very classic book. We have a lot of things that are actually meeting where we are. So I think I want to unpack that a little bit more later, but that's kind of long and short of my story. In between that Bitcoin SMS Bitcoin wallet, I did a DID project in Korea. And after that, I been into DAO, and now I'm doing a lot of other stuff with building narrative, culture building, cultural coding, that's what I say, and also experience design for individuals and organizations. And dialogue that needs to happen. So I'm kind of, a lot of people, like when they introduce me, I assume as somebody connecting movement and then business and local and then global and ecology and technology. So that's kind of like the good summary of who I am. So I'm a pollinator and a bridge.
Love that. That's beautiful. And I specifically really enjoyed the story of how you saw the problem emerging before kind of you had looked into Bitcoin as a solution necessarily. And I think one of the things that you mentioned in the space is there's obviously a lot more momentum. Things are moving a lot faster. We were actually just talking about it this week where like all these announcements are coming out with like Stripe and Coinbase and like people moving to the space and adopting the technology. And it's amazing news. And I agree. It is happening faster than expected. I always assumed that by the time this happened, there'd be a lot other things that had happened as well. But one thing that comes with that as the industry grows is a lot of people are now looking at the tech first and then seeking for problems to solve. And so I think it is super important to be aware of like, what are we actually doing this for? What problems exist? And get out of our bubbles to actually find the problems because even today, like the peer-to-peer payments in some of the countries are still not solved. And like myself as a Canadian that no longer has an off-ramp, like I'm finding myself doing very similar things of like sending USDC to a friend and then they got to put it in a plastic bag and all that stuff. So we got a long way to go.
It still is, to be honest, like if the problem that I want you to solve is still not have solved, right? And because it's not a popular thing, people are not focusing on the bottom of the pyramid.
What happened to that 2G SMS? Like, was it hardware? Was it like a hardware software play? Like, if you could just run us through that a little bit, because was this before the M-Pesa example that happened around 2015 in Kenya?
So M-Pesa has a very long history. So M-Pesa was already there. And then M-Pesa was one of the most successful, I mean, even till now, the mobile money system. And more than the amount of their GDP is actually going through the transaction volume is more than their GDP of the Kenya. So it's like a crazy amount. And our system was like, because we started as a project, right? We just wanted to build something that is very free, very autonomous. And we didn't want to build something that is relying on the one telco, and the Safaricom, which is owning the M-Pesa, is technically owned by Kenyan government. If they can shut it down anytime if they want to. But if I have to build a company again, I would not do that. I would definitely adopt the market. But that was a project to see how far we can go. And so what we did was actually we used the Android app that is open source app that is collecting the health data of people in the rural area. So they send information about their health and their health data to that Android app, and then that Android app actually kind of communicating with the other servers and stuff like that. So we took that and then we make that as a gateway. So people simply like type send 0.2 BTC to this number, and then send that message to the gateway. And the gateway actually does the job. And then the gateway operator is become like a local agent. And so they can actually set how much fee they want to have. So that was kind of the system. And we launched, and then in 2 weeks, it was like a 19 different country. People were start sending Bitcoins between using our network and using our product. So it was a quite interesting experiment. But at the end, I mean, we productized, we were all like, none of us were founders before. And, I started this with my ex-partner, and, and I was also going through a lot of growth period. So we all were kind of immature in some way, but we learned so much. And then we operated actually between Singapore and the Philippine corridor the most. And we were kind of like a last mile solution for the local exchanges in Philippines. So people who work in work in Singapore. The mothers, the aunties, like they go to Singapore and work as nanny and cleaners, and they have to send money back home, and they have to line up in front of the bank for like half day, and they cannot rest because they have to use their free time to actually stand on the line. So we kind of like try to tackle that a little bit, but it was just too early. The educations and everything was just too much. And then now actually people are more equipped with education. So Binance P2P, especially in Africa, people use that to do a lot of different transactions. And it's another story, like a lot of story that how like crypto ecosystem actually changed the economics in Africa. It was very, very interesting. But yeah, that's what happened to the product. So we closed down, and then I took like long break. That break made me actually grow into a different person, and then continue to the journey.
Yeah, that's really interesting. What is the recent example of another phone that's just got introduced? Forgot the name of it.
Jumbo.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. That's also predominantly around the transfer of money between numbers, or is it doing something slightly different?
No, so Jumbo is actual phone, right?
Okay.
So they have like different Web3 native apps in their phone, and that they are
Okay.
selling that phone in the lower price, like a smartphone in the lower price in the Africa market. Yeah,
Yes.
so that's what they're doing. So it's like a little bit different game.
Yeah, because obviously, like the mobile penetration in those regions is like very high, so you can get a direct access to every individual user pretty seamlessly just through SMS, right?
SMS is huge, and still the internet connection. There is a debate, like okay, you know what, like Africa has most of coverage, but it's actually not true. And those that the polarization of the wealth is also very huge, and some people can
Yes.
actually do a lot by on and off lamping, and a lot of entrepreneurs that we even meet, and then they are like, for example, they're here and so they can actually do what they dream of. But some people are still bottom of pyramid and no money. They have to live day by day and lending money from Mars one day, and then the day after they lending money from Iman, and then they lending money from Songyi, and then they actually circulate the debt, and then the interest rate is like extremely high. So there's still a lot of trouble, but one thing that I've been talking a lot these days is like a global majority, and that's where the real world use cases is. Instead of calling global south, I think global majority is a right word, and then it has a meaning to it, because like they are the one who is only like the whole population of the global north is going down, 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 down. And Korea will be disappear in 2-3 generations because our birth rate is so low. It's below 1. So we are losing people but the global south, global majority is growing, and then especially Africa is like one and only left frontier market. So we want to actually test a lot of a new design, and not just implementing our idea, but like building with the local entrepreneurs and local business and local ecosystem to really become the test ground for new system, not just crypto, but like a lot of different politic systems and new design that we're coming on. And so the GM, the global majority, will be kind of the next chapter of crypto, and it should be, in my opinion.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And also, like, I think like politics is really important. You just kind of like said that quite briefly, but like it is like intrinsically kind of been kept down as a region pretty much politically to some degree. And it looks like there are these like global shifts happening in terms of like finance and power, right? Like Saudi Arabia recently announced that it's not going to be re-signing the oil trade with the US. Like that's a pretty big deal, right? So it's like the movement is going away from like Western kind of, I guess, majority in a way, into something that is like resonating a lot more with these types of regions. So actually the timing for you probably seems quite right to continue doing what you're doing in these areas, right? And are you involved with any policy related stuff on the ground as well? I mean, naturally, I guess the two would tie in with each other.
Yeah. So, I mean, in Africa, the Kenya is kind of the leading country, but although they had a lot of like a huge demonstration for the last few weeks because of their tax bills and so on, like some people got shot and then there's a lot of noise, but Kenya still is a really interesting hub and a lot of international comes, and the country is kind of stable. And I mean, we have South Africa, but South Africa is a very interesting country, and it's not like complete Africa, people so to say. And so we working closely with the tech envoy of technology envoy of Kenya. So he is actually the advisor to the president, and kind of like sharing what's happening. And so we just do a lot of like chit chat, and also they're very interested in DAO like organization, because like there's a lot of big tech company and NGOs. They're all there in Kenya headquartered. They try to do something, but you know, all these companies coming with their ego and their agenda, nothing gonna work because everybody has their own thing, right? So we were just discussing like how can we then create a more open governance model for these different stakeholders to work together as a DAO-like community. And then from there, I mean, we can do a lot of pilots, and then from there we can actually bring with some of the evidence of what we've done, and then we can actually bring it to the policy level, and then talking with the policymakers and the government. So there is like a lot of different layers of working through that. Yeah, but when we did the tour with Vitalik, we visited Ghana, Zambia, Kenya, and one more country, Ethiopia. So we get to meet most of the government, and they were open. They want to learn, and I think one narrative like we I truly believe in deep inside, but it's maybe hard to see, is like the colonization still continue in Africa, although officially French no longer governing whatever other French country that they were colonized by French. But in fact, there is still a lot of practical stuff that is depend on French government or other colonizers kind of country or company whatsoever, because politics is something that is very, very tricky. People don't want to give up easily because it's a power related. And for example, like handful of African country, they don't print their own money, and it's all printed in Europe, and they charge like 8 to 10% of the fee. And then so they actually also, especially the French government, when the money was printed in France, I think 35%, I don't know exact number, but like close to that number is actually reserved in the France kind of authority. So in that sense, they're not financially fully decolonized, right? They can do whatever they want, and they kind of using different like political agenda to create issue and do something and do whatever things that is more favor for them. So there's still a lot happening, but once government understand, actually they can use crypto ecosystem and then start looking at the market, not just domestic market or their own country, of using their natural resource or commodity they're actually producing it, but like going out making money outside of their region, and then make those crypto in, and then ticketing, clipping everybody's taxes, for example. And there could be actually way more money than what they can actually make by selling flowers, selling coffee. And there is so many different things that could be done with in the crypto space. And also by that, if they can have their true kind of agency and kind of decoupling from that colonization, by having ability to even create, I know it's a little bit of a wild idea, but having their own currency, right? And then you don't have to it just decouple with whatever. But it takes a lot of different things to make it happen, but the conversation is there. So very interesting conversation, like especially related to reason, like, oh, what if Africa still has a lot of their land are protected because they never had the money to develop or something like that? What if we can actually issue an asset that is nature backed? So people are actually protecting nature rather than destroying the nature, and then still making money. So there's so many different angle of new economic system that we can test and we can design using those global majority area. I mean, not only Africa, but whole of global majority. So I think a lot of topic that we would like to have it in Thailand during DevCon. So some of us are planning a global majority district, so GM district, and it's bringing LATAM and Africa and Asia builders together. And we will have like more of this conversation, a philosophical conversation, ancient wisdom conversation, our indigenous wisdom, our ancestor wisdom, and our like new economic models for our regions, and what are the real world solving problem instead of just yield or DeFi and compounding. It's all important. Don't get me wrong, but something more tangible and more fundamental. I think the space for those dialogue is extremely important. So we want to have that too.
That's amazing. And exactly as you describe, it takes so many layers of understanding the problems, and whether it's the power structures within each of these countries of kind of local government that still wants to maintain power. And usually whenever it's in that position, it's quite short-sighted and people kind of want to preserve control, even though if they loosen up and give the people a chance to kind of grow the pie, what the government cut would be is actually greater than what it is currently under kind of like the politics of it. And similarly, like the large corporations that are coming in and seeing the global majority as a economic opportunity, the mindset that people approach solving the problem is a lot more of like, hey, we have these solutions, you guys should adopt it, and this is what it could be, instead of coming in and asking like, what's going on, what are you guys struggling with, what do we need to implement, and learning and adapting the solutions with the local builders and community. And I think that's something that you've said a few times, both in person and various interviews, of like, the way you solve this problem is to actually approach it and ask the right questions and be a lot more kind of in the spirit of learning rather than controlling or building solutions. And so would be amazing to hear from your, I don't know if you call it adventures or kind of travels across the global majority on the ground. What are examples of the local community leading the way in those conversations and be given the space to kind of come up with those solutions themselves? And what are some examples that you've seen that clearly hasn't been working? And that could be across like stable coins, it could be across peer-to-peer lending, or just any specific solutions that are emerging grassroots.
Yeah, it's interesting because when there is a more challenge, there's more opportunity. So there is so many different angles that we can approach to this emerging economies. And I think showing up is number one rule. You just showing up to the land and go meet local community and just listen, as you say, just learning mind. And then, just keep listening and ask the right questions. And then they will tell you because they've been waiting to be heard and be seen. So I think that's extremely important. I think a lot of, especially the African narrative at the moment, is in that phase. And there is amazing builders doing things, but mostly like on and off lamp is really a good example of the especially the African ecosystem. The fintech is still very strong, and the finance is in the center of everything. They're talking about surviving, not just even investing and saving, but there's a lot of different layers that is happening. And actually their product is pretty sick. And I'm like, when in Kenya, there is one company making on and off lamp applications, and I use it. I'm like, wow, this looks like actually Web2 application. I'm enjoying using it, and we should actually export this kind of user experience and UI and UX to a broader ecosystem. So an African ecosystem is, I can only compare Africa and Asia. Yeah, when we talk about crypto community, Africa community is directly go to the builder. So it's all about developer, builder, and entrepreneurs and founder. And Asia community is like many segments, like traders and like a retail investors, and also people who are deep thinker, like more philosopher type, and also like a digital democracy crew, and a little bit of public good crew, and like a crypto nomads. And so there is so many different things is in Asia, but Africa like straight up like builder community. So it's very interesting. And I think there is a kind of combination or complementing each other. So that's what we are very excited about, bringing all this global majority coming together to share their strengths and weakness and ask and offer to weave all that. In terms of like Asia, I think Asia is an interesting continent. It's the only continent that has developed economy and emerging economy together. So we have imbalance within the region, and we also have our own colonization, not from the West, but like Japan colonized Korea, and then Taiwan and China did. That China still have a very much big tension with Taiwan. So our Taiwan friends, they are developing their own DID system and other decentralized system that they see crypto or blockchain technology as a most feasible way of implementing their next step. So the government actually putting a lot of effort doing research and then doing, because you never know when China gonna come and then eat up Taiwan, then Taiwanese people will all disband, and that they need their own identity to keep that, the nation states, which they don't have officially. So a lot of different like a narrative of play. And I think in a zooming out, what we can offer as a global majority to the global north or more developed economy is that really the wisdom and then the depth of the approach to life, and a lot of our philosophy and how we work, how we live is really coming from the ecology and the nature-based thinking, and even Taoism and Buddhism and a lot of this philosophical thing. And I mean, when we talk about politics, it's actually on the bottom of that person who is doing either bad or whatever good. It's all about that person's integrity and that person's, right? So you actually have to do a lot of self-work to become a better person. And then to understand, actually make myself, like doing self-work is how I contribute to the world peace, right? I mean, in between there is a, self-work, and then the coordination and the governance, and then the world peace. But self-work is equal world peace. Without self-work, is nothing going to happen. So I think we, as an Asian and as an African or as a Latam person, we do understand that value without even us knowing, because that's how we born and raised in a way. And that's kind of the most important offering that global majority has. And I think we definitely want to speak more about this, and then finding our history. And there are, even in Korea, we had a decentralized like treasury management tradition. Literally, it's called K, and the people were putting money together in a one pot, and it's been more than 1,000 years in our history. And you can find this exact same example, and that is still alive and active in everywhere in the global south. So, why not we actually using that existing wisdom-based social technology, and we bring our modern knowledge into that and make that system better. And that's what the real mass adoption is going to happen, right? And instead of like we try to come up with, as Iman said, this is a solution, a token and all that. people will not get it. People will never get it because they will not care. And it's just too much of a learning curve. And some people will get it and then they will become a translator for something. But we have to actually see in a very big term, what is a low hanging fruit for our ecosystem and mass adoption. And I see like global majority, not only the population of this region, but also that so much wisdom and practices that has been done before. And I think that's where we can tap into it. I don't think that I exactly answer your question about the single use cases, but that's kind of like a framework, which is, I think, is more important. The shift that mindset. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually prefer that answer than the question I asked. I absolutely agree. We've had this conversation. Actually, a friend of ours during ECC was talking about how Web3 just needs that kind of personal development and therapy, because in any situation when you're making decisions, there's always going to be a prisoner dilemma of sorts where there's something that will benefit the individual and something that will benefit the collective. And in a world where we're filled with traumas and we haven't necessarily collectively achieved the hierarchy of needs where we feel comfortable and safe to risk the potential for the collective gain, everyone ends up deciding kind of the option that will preserve their individual gain because it feels safer, comfortable, more values aligned, but in a way that is a very Western mindset. And in the East, and even kind of originally I'm from Iran, and we've had these conversations with Maz where like families also do the shared treasury, where if someone has a problem, you kind of like send it to the collective and see if anyone can help out. And so I think instead of necessarily trying to fix it individually and saying, oh, people need to change for us to become more collective and build better incentives like that, maybe it is actually finding examples, finding almost like templates of things working in a way that is more collectivist. And since humans are quite mimetic, once they see it working out in the East or wherever it might be, it suddenly triggers the thought of like, oh, maybe this does work. And it doesn't necessarily take the individual work, which is still important, obviously, but it's not something that we can kind of mass adopt therapy for the West or specific regions in general.
Yeah, but I want to share some example like that. So what the projects that I'm working on these days is called Pagoda, which is like a alliance of the like Asian visionaries. And speaking of Asian visionaries, like people who like open source community leaders and philosophers and researchers and founders and stuff like that. People who are interested in building, especially like Ethereum ecosystem or align with Ethereum value system. We come together and without any expectations, okay, guys, I think this bringing our collective story and wisdom is time sensitive, and we have a DevCon coming. So why don't we come together and then actually build some sort of collective narrative together and collective visioning? And that's what happened in April. And it's been 3 months. SOC's 3-month-old baby is really still developing the mind and before the concrete action. And there we had a 9 days together and with a 45 ecosystem builder from 12 different Asia countries. So this was a quite amazing, bringing all these people together and hear everybody's vision of Dreamy Asia. What is the success look like? What does a Dreamy Asia look like with the decentralization? And everybody pitch or everybody share the way they wanted. And I shared a poem, and somebody shared the presentation. Somebody just shared with their dialogues, and we collect all that data. And we kind of come up with a value system and the framework, how we understand and to make our Dreamy Asia what is needed to happen. And one thing that came up connected to our conversation about the self-development and self-work was a protocol of being. Because even though that self-work is needed, it's extremely lonely journey. I mean, of course, somebody else cannot do that for you, but at least that that, okay, there is a group of people that are actually, that I care, that I love, and that I trust and respect, are actually doing this work together. And if we can bring that kind of pattern and make it habit out of it, like of talking about and make it normal to talk about protocol of being, like your being, your well-being, your self-development, and the book that you're interested in, your inspiration, your creativity. And I think this world, even if when we have a chat, and it's just jump into the business, jump into the something transactional. But instead of that, just why don't we create a space for my human self kind of arise, and then people are listening and respect, and then we have like this layer of like a social layer and the circulation layer and then tech layer. I think there's a 3 layer that we need to develop, and the social layer, I think, is actually tells more than the protocol of being, but protocol of being is like a core of the foundation of the person, is actually live by their value and have aware, and then have it to conflict, kind of confronting conflict instead of avoiding. And then that there is people actually surrounding you to support that journey. And then from there, and then social layer is also talking about developing the different value system and narrative to share more of that. And then also having that to you, but also to your community, and then so they can overflow. And circulation layer is like, it's like a heart, pumping, because we have a lot of different country, have a different dynamic, different narrative, different strength and weakness. And the problem is, like, even in Asia, we don't talk. It's all very much siloed. Western Europe, they're all connected, so they talk all the time, they hang all the time. But Asia is not like that, because still there is some sort of barrier, the cultural language. So, but to work together, we need to have that circulation system that is sharing information, and you produce something and put it in the circulation system. It's like a blood, red blood cell and then a white blood cell keep flowing into the system. And the tech layer is like a more like nerve system, and that is supporting other circulation system and all that. Yeah, so a lot of this analogy, even if we did not expect the way that how it's come out, and then it's just aligned with the Asia value when we have our people together. So what I want to say, I know it's kind of like a detouring, but the protocol being, if we can systematize, and then also if we can have a very simple playbook that people can use in the crypto space wherever, and then make that practice very normal, I think it would be quite epic, and then people are open to it. And then people in crypto are the one who is actually living in the future. They have a more chance to change the world rather than people who are not interested in crypto. So we are kind of like targeting the niche market of the change makers, right? So it is possible, and somebody has to continue that experiment, and everybody can. All of us should be joining, not Pagoda, but like that process. Yeah.
You mentioned that you went from like social work to like tech founder to DAOs, and like spent obviously 12 years in the space now. How much of like the best practices that you've basically executed or have like learned about when it comes to DAOs that you still think are pretty relevant to this day? And then which ones of those have you kind of like learn that are not necessarily usable in a way? Is because there has been a sense that the narrative around and sentiments around themes and topics in crypto do drastically change quite fast, especially if you're getting most of your like sentiment bias from Twitter and Farcaster. There is a lot of changes in like sentiment, right? And that could be very overwhelming, especially as builders. We have like in Cloud News as well, kind of went from we started off fundamentally coming together because we had very clear value alignment and belief that what we wanted to do was going to touch on actually eventually the global majority regions, because that's where our learnings came from, right? Our experiences came from those regions. But market being market, startups being startups, investors being investors, it segues you into like going after more mature markets to test an idea, and then you can kind of like grow, scale, and do whatever. But the rate of sentiments and biases that are being thrown at individuals in this space that we're obviously orchestrating ourselves is causing a lot of confusion, right? That confusion is also causing a lot of anxiety within us, right? And then that kind of creates that judgment that we talked about earlier, right? It's like, oh, it should be better. Why is this not better? Da, da, da. And then obviously with DAOs, it's gotten a bit more of a negative kind of sentiment in some circles because, you know, in some ways we took what we knew about organizational like coordination and structure and then we threw it out the window and we're like, we're just going to do something drastically different, right? But then within that, there were individuals that came from like social work, came from organizational work, and I would say like the team at Hats, you know, have got like a pretty, you know, long history of like working within these like structures before they came into DAOs. And those voices and like your voices are ones that really resonate with like builders that are not just trying to like throw existing frameworks out the window just for the sake of creating something new, but taking what we already know and like, you know, kind of evaluating it, making it better, adapting it, and making it less prescriptive when it comes to onboarding, right? So in a nutshell, just kind of keen to know like what is happening in that area in your perspective. What are some of the things that you think at this very moment in time is really important for builders to hear from you to kind of just from an advice like feedback perspective? I think that would be really helpful.
Mm-hmm. I was in this space, you know, in 2014, being in San Francisco, living with a bunch of crypto people. You just walk around and people talk about crypto all the time. And, you know, like yesterday's scammer, no longer scammer today because the technology developed in like at night, you know, like everything kind of changing. And I felt like stupid. Like, I'm like, I don't even speak English well. And I mean, back then I wasn't, you know, and I'm like, what am I doing here? And I'm like doing this thing and I sit on the CEO role because no one else wanted to do. And then I have to like deal with all this thing. And then these people who like coming from MIT, Stanford, Harvard, and all these people that I came from like university that no one knows, you know, from global, right? And I mean, it's not that meta, but yeah, that kind of is like giving me a lot of stress in some way. And then like, do I have to know everything what's happening to be on the top of everything to actually have a conversation with them? And that there is still that insecurity. It continues, and I think that's what kind of make me empty out of my soul, because I keep criticizing. You're not enough. How could you not know this? You have to study, but then I need to sleep too. I need to eat too. But then I don't have enough time to catch up with all of that. And of course it's impossible. But then, and one day that I just like gave up in a way that I'm like, guys, actually I want to just focus on things that is not changing, which is a more value-driven system. I think that was another waking up moment to me. And then that got me into like a more connection to nature. Yeah. So like, what is not changing then? And it's actually, you know, our value system of love and trust and care and all of that. But like, what is actually the mechanism that is not changing? And it's actually coming from ecology and from nature. And nature will be here when we are all gone. And it was here before us as well. So what are the things that actually the nature giving us? And then I can confidently say, whenever I design something breaking or like doing something quite amazing that is still connecting to the ancient wisdom, is actually all coming from the nature ecology. So most of the book that I'm reading is about the nature connections and ecology and anthropology books. And that's giving me so many different ideas. And then also reassuring the direction that I'm going is actually the right direction. So if we keep following that pattern of nature, which is actually the science, the nature has a science and magic both together. And I identify magic as a, you know, science that is haven't not proven it yet. And also science is like a magic that it has proved. So you have to really think on the bottom line. I think that will give you the anchoring feeling, and then keep like doing what you need to do. And when you kind of like are facing the challenge, if you just ask people that are playing in head space most of the time, you will only get the change, the answer that is keep changing, trending. But these things are changing all the time. But you don't want to keep building around this area because like things will change tomorrow, right? So how can we then keep aware of what's happening here, but building something that is very, very strong and anchoring and trusting yourself, and actually the nature analogy or nature wisdom and your ancestor wisdom is what is backing you. And then once you actually doing the self work of that, and you actually will feel in your body. And I believe everybody has a ability to sense what's right and what's wrong. So you have to listen to yourself rather than the noise. Noise will still continue. Noise will still be there. No one knows which token would do well. I mean, we'll kind of know, but we don't know. Yeah, so that's one thing. DAO, interesting topic. Interesting topic. When first DAO was born, and it was actually in the Ethereum time, like, oh, you know what? Now that our smart contract's so smart, we can completely take the trust out of human, and then smart contract to run this organization. That's what DAO was in the Web3 term. But then quickly, the DAO was failed, and then other DAOs were keep failing. But our friends were keep building technology around that. And I think all those experiment was a learning process of hitting the ceiling. And I think last year at the Istanbul, it was the first time that I see and hear sentiment, actually what we built, just tech for tech, wasn't good. A lot of DAOs are kind of declining. Their governance was failing, and people were not actually engaged. They're not voting. So that kind of incline that people are now kind of taking a U curve of like, okay, then we have to actually focus on people's behavior, and then psychology, and like building more around what the needs is, what the needs for this type of new organization or system or coordination. So I think that's what is happening. But I think we're still in the death belly of the DAO ecosystem. If you're, also DAO is like very different. Some DAO, like, let's say Uniswap, they're great. They have a lot of like treasury, many people participating. They don't need to do any human coordination. I mean, like human to human connection, because they're so easy. It's like investment DAO. You put money and you get token, you vote, easy. But there is another DAO that is extremely based on the social interaction between the people and connection. So in my opinion, the word DAO is very, very limited. And I think there is now more community that is decentralized autonomous organization, but they don't call themselves as a DAO. They just do their own experiment. Yeah, even Pagoda, even other things that I'm doing, like it's a DAO, complete DAO, but we don't call it as a DAO because it's limiting us. And so I think that's where the situation is kind of. And one funny example, I don't know if you guys know BTS, the K-pop star, BTS. BTS, they have a fan club called ARMY. They are DAO, literally. They are one of the biggest DAO in the world, I would say. And they're very active. And they have their own business model. They have they all figure things out,
Like super fans, right?
Yeah, and then
They're
like
super
the
fans, right?
army, they have a like local chapter. They have their own manual. They have their own system. They do well, and so I'm like thinking, if you want to do DAO, if you want to do decentralized organization, there is two things in terms of like who should be in the DAO, but like what should be DAO. So one, like what should be DAO? Let's start from there. What should be DAO is that you have to focus on the problem again. What kind of a pain do we want to solve? Why do we want to be painkiller for what pain? And the DAO should be, still approached as a problem solver rather than, sake of doing DAO and sake of issuing token, the sake of pretending we are decentralized. It's not going to work when you don't have that originality of that problem solving angle, a narrative and a value system. So that's one thing. And who should be in the DAO? I think DAO is, to be honest, if the proper DAO, it's not for everybody. For investment DAO, if you have Ethereum, ETH, or you have any token, then yes, you can participate. And then that is meeting your requirements. So that type of DAO, yes, I'm excluding that because that's very simple mechanic. But if you want to talk about like DAO that is actually changing the system, actually changing the governance of our future society, you have to involve human. And this one, autonomous, I think DAO, A comes first. Autonomy always comes first. You have to be autonomous being. Either you're a machine, either you're AI, either you're a human being, either you're a river or mountain, whatever. And then you actually, what autonomy mean is actually, I am taking responsibility of what I did. And also I know what I want. I know what I don't want. So at least you have that like, kind of like a personality stack. Then you can actually connect it with the others that are also autonomous. And then the organization or organism, I use a lot of words like this day, I don't even call it organization because like a lot of Web3 or crypto company does not have a legal structure. We just living organism. Yeah. So that's how it works. So I think going back to the protocol being, or some sort of like self work or some sort of like a systemic work to learn that skill set and understanding what really, being the autonomous being meaning, I think that's extremely important and people can learn 100%. So focusing on that, and then we can keep developing more words. And I think the words DAO will remain as a category, but not as an identifying factor of organization in near future. So that's kind of my guess. And a lot of creator economy, and then those like a YouTuber and a fan club and then influencers and all of this, it will become a DAO. It has to be, right? So even when we look at just our normal world, and they are going to that direction. Now it's like people are no longer watching Fox TV. I mean, well, still people watching Fox TV, but you know what I mean? People just watch YouTube. They spend most of the time in the YouTube rather than on TV. And I mean, we don't have a TV actually. We just have like a beam for movie, but it will be just like that. Our next generation would not, work for a company that make them feel they're just a little tool rather than themselves. And they're not going to work. And they're more value driven. They care about their longevity. There is so many information about living forever in YouTube. So they keep algorithm keep feeding them to be healthy, and hopefully not the other way. But anyway, so those kind of like a new future economy of the normal world is heading to that direction. So I think DAO in general, I see huge opportunity if we do our experiment well, and then keep building the technology that is problem focused rather than sake of DAO tooling. It's not going to work. So if we do that, then when they actually need those kind of tool, how can we then incentivize our fans, incentivize our reader, and how can we then build like engaging more of our community to make decision for our product and our episode and stuff like all crypto. Web3 should be there as a backbone. So I think that's where the kind of shifting will happen. And to be honest, it's not going to take a long time, but I feel like our technology hasn't developed that yet. So I feel not anxious, but like, okay, we have to have more conversation around this, and then really building the real world kind of like solution that people can use tangibly, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it comes down to cultural shifts and mindsets, right? Like sometimes I just kind of like go through reels just to see like what's going on in the matrix, and like I keep getting targeted. Recently I've been targeted with lots of like Gen Z meme videos on like the workplace, and it's fucking hilarious. It's just like no one wants to work, like no one wants to work in an office, And it's like it is like very. It's funny because like I remember when I was coming out of university, like from my undergrad, and it was like such a different world to what it is now, where like the companies so obviously in the final year there's companies that come to hire talent, right? Fresh talent, fresh grads or whatever. And it's all the kind of like KPMGs of the world and like management consultants. and there was also a defense company called BAE Systems was like trying to hire all these new grads, and like looking at it now, the way most profiles like interact with like corporations or like just office work in general, they see it as a joke. Like there's no way they want to be a cog in the wheel, right? And I'm just really enjoying those these like things that are getting targeted right now. But yeah, I think it is it really does come down to like a cultural shift, like what you said about BTS. That's really interesting. It's all these like self-organized communities that are popping up to say like around the collective, obviously like meme in a way, with like the stuff that we're looking at, even from like a traditional like brand perspective, like things in consumer, right? Which is very commercial in a way, is actually there's less of the commercialization aspect of it, of like go and buy this like luxury item to look cool, right? Like that sentiment is also kind of like has its cracks showing.
Yes.
And it's more about these things that you just said. It's like exclusivity around like a thing, you know, around an objective, around some kind of topic or whatever. And like the more that keeps happening, the more it makes these types of things obviously absolutely relevant. It's more kind of like how do we like bridge ourselves or wedge ourselves within these worlds in a way, so that we are the ones that they would want to come and, well, not we, but the tech is what, or the tools are the things that they want to come and adopt, because it just makes their organizing much more streamlined in a way. And I think that's also like what Zach from Coordinate has said a few times. Like we talked to him a lot before, and we were like, where do you see the use case of Coordinate going, right? As a platform that's been around for a long time now, you know, one of the things that he's quite relaxed about is, in a way, I don't know if he would like that word, but like if it's kind of like wait until like not, yeah, when the market timing is right, like they will come. And I fundamentally agree with that. If you do have like the, I guess, financial runway to be able to kind of like constrain yourself for a while to make sure that then adoption happens, and that's all well and good. But in some scenarios, that's not necessarily the case. So maybe there is more that we could do, or like learn a bit more about what's really going on in the like IRL space to say, okay, this is probably a good time enough now to go and like chill, I don't know, DAOs or like tools that they could just come and like adopt in a way, because it doesn't seem too far off. Basically, this is what I'm trying to get. Anyway, I just wanted to talk about the memes that I'm getting targeted. It's funny.
Yeah, I mean, it is actually true, you know, like even related to what you guys are doing, like the
Yeah,
people are not buying product, people are actually buying value in the story, right?
yeah,
And then
that's it.
you have like, you know, this pen, you can just exactly the same pen. There are like hundreds of people making exactly the same thing. And why would you buy this thing? So uh,
Yeah,
it's just all gonna turn into even more like a new modern version of a tribalism. And I think that is related to like a regeneration of our humanity as well. I think tribalism is not necessarily bad in my opinion, and then break it down. And also like DAOs with like thousands of people, I don't believe in that the DAO has the life. You know, when it's too big, it's too much. So even in DAO, like I try to like break it down and creating a sub DAO, but that are all aligned with the mothership DAO in the culturally as a DNA. But like everybody wants to do something different. They get to go find their thing. You know, they're all connected to circulation and nerve system of the DAO, but all the organs are working differently. So it has to be that way too. So yeah, it would merge, and I can pretty much predict that the merge will happen first. But I don't think our Web3 space is ready to welcome that the needs of people, because this is growing every day. Like this Web2 or normal people kind of creating that creator economies and tribalism of their own. But it's extremely important that we providing that tool for them to actually issue their own token and rewarding system, and also creating the micro economy of their own. And then they can actually connect with the macro as well. And that's how we can decouple from our current system. Because if I don't need to spend fiat any longer, and all my
yeah,
food, my goods my work, my hobby, all paid in crypto in some way. They're all connected. And that's when we can actually finally say goodbye to the current power, most importantly, and then current capital. And of course, we will have a transition moment, but that's, I think, where the DAO will shine the most. And I think the word DAO, again, it would not be staying there for a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And absolutely, there's so many different types of DAOs. And as you mentioned, I guess the undertapped potential of DAOs, especially in the Web3 space, has really missed out on the potential of like how natural systems work, how, as you mentioned, the being protocol connects us. And most of the examples of cooperatives and groups of people that have come together and exhibited signs of organism-like structures that we want to emulate often are not financialized necessarily. It might actually be linked to more intrinsic, let's say, like value parameters. And I often wonder if the reason why we always go down the financialization of a collective treasury is because that's where most of our examples have been. And especially in a world where we're driven by, as unfortunate as it is, in a capitalist mindset of like, if a VC starts investing in wallets, builders will start building wallets. And if VCs invest more in layer ones and infrastructure, that's the direction it goes. And what you see with the early stages of DAOs and now meme tokens is anything that has that financial tokenization is the thing that gets the most attention. Whereas as we develop these structures, and whether it's building the mental models around how these things work, and maybe something at the tech layer where it's not necessarily just driven by this financialization, and there are other ways of measuring contribution in DAOs to say that by coming into this space as a fan club for BTS, every time I organize something or every time I show up and support, that is my ticket into the DAO instead of trying to financialize it and make the token go up. I think it is a learning process, and it is interesting to see how we can start decoupling it from these financial experiments and try to do more DAOs that don't necessarily have this valuation driven approach. I wonder how you merge those two worlds, because I also know that you were experimenting with investment DAOs and collective impact experiments where you can actually kind of change the models of how money flows to supplying, let's say, the nutrients within how we connect and create value. And oftentimes the thing that holds us back from being a natural organism that sends nutrients to the nodes that need it most, rather than accruing them at the nodes that kind of seek the power, is almost like an ego thing. And if we want to emulate natural systems, we have to, whether it's building autonomy, whether it's building structures that kind of help divert value to the places that need it most. How do you see the funding side coming into these DAO experiments?
I think, as you say, it's a very dynamic space, but a lot of the money plays that, and then also, kind of ego focus. I would say like ego and a higher self, like higher self being that you are true to yourself and you're very self-aware and you're mindful and conscious about what you're doing. And ego is like, your I wouldn't want to use a shame, but like, you did something with your ego, and then like at night before you go to bed, I'm like, why did I do it? I feel shame for it. Like I should have not done that. So like that is like an ego level. I think, yeah, it's very, very important that we turning our mindset into the more abundant mindset versus not the scarcity mindset. It's really coming from the greed. How much money do we need? Do I want to be a billionaire? Actually, to be honest, I'll be happy just being millionaires, not billionaires, because like I've seen a lot of people with a lot of asset. It comes with its own baggage, and I'm like more rather to have enough for me to live and enough for me to eat healthy food and being placed in whatever I want to be, and I can spend my time with my family. So like the service DAO and even the impact collective, the investment DAO, and all of those things at the core, we had a 3 line, and working with people that I love and trust, do something that is matter for me and for the world, and making enough resource to sustain my lifestyle. And I know that lifestyle is very subjective. So some people need a Chanel bag. I don't need it. So I would need a little less money. But so that if that's the core, you know exactly what you need and how much you need and who you want to work with and what you want to work with. And once that's meet, I don't think you need more than that. So people has to experience that life of like having enough of people that you support, doing something that is meaningful, and have enough money to sustain your lifestyle. And then sorry that I say money, but I always highlight as a resource. So what is a resource? It's not just money, relationship, your energy, your time, and all of those are come as a package of the resource. So I think redefining resource is extremely important. So whenever, like I do get work, right? I do work. And the first thing I ask whenever there is a lot of different projects, and even our community, when we do something, when we set the goal or when we set the mission, we ask, is this something that only Songyi can do? Is this something only Impact Collective can do? Is this only Pagoda can do? And if the answer is yes, then we do it. If it's not, then we just keep passing to other ecosystem players, and you don't need to do everything it comes to you. And I'm not saying because, don't be greedy, but you cannot do it. You don't have the capacity, and it will stress you out, and you will lose your freedom by doing that. Keep wanting, greedy. So that's kind of the mindset shift that needs to happen. And the resource piece. So I think resource is extremely important, and we do have more than enough money to support the whole ecosystem. Has enough money to support individuals doing amazing work and money to invest. So it's just a coordination, an allocation of the right resource. And I can only tell you from my own experience, but the money plays a big role. But it's something that you don't want to compromise too much. It always comes with a cost, always comes with some sort of string attached. And you have to actually have that boundary and integrity. Is this money, is this relationship, transactional relationship of money coming in and out and give and receive? Is this an equal partnership, not like extraction? So I think that's extremely important. And I can tell you, if you speak the word, your mind and your awareness, then people will feel it and the magic will happen. That's the only thing I can tell. Yeah. And the new idea will come. You keep having abundant mindset of sharing opportunity, work opportunity, business opportunity with the people around you. You never know what the other who are invited will bring. And they will keep building abundance of everything. Yeah. So I think that's how I personally see my resource management. And of course, there's a bitter moments, like I left all my Bitcoin, and when I left the company, so but I still managed to live a happy life, and then, enough freedom to do whatever I want. And now I finally be in a space that I even spiritually really connect with my work. And it's just coming from the experiment. And I don't think I compromise my integrity to be where I am now. And if I did it, and everyone should be able to do it. And everybody is in abundant mindset, and we are like a growing pie together. It's not like sharing the pie. Then we automatically supporting each other and showing up for like something like this is showing up for each other. And then that will change the dynamic of the ecosystem. But unfortunately, people who think like this is very small portion wise. But I also trust the world can change by one person. So if we keep doing this, then I think it will change. So that's, I know it's not like so finance or focus on the practicality, but that's how I interact with my money and my resource.
Yeah, and also like, yeah, you're right. There is like a lot of funding allocations for like grassroots projects. Obviously, like Gitcoin has a lot of impressive metrics. Optimism's doing, I think Optimism is doing like an exceptional amount of work when it comes to like different users in crypto, whether that be creator, whether that be builder. Like they are really just having like their team also is obviously like a very good like champion of good builders and creators in general. So I think there is money to be found. The one thing that is like a little bit like I don't think there is something. I think anti like monopoly makes sense because like we've seen that with like monopolization and monopoly structures, it kills competition. So like, you know, it doesn't allow innovation to happen. So that's a valid point. On like the kind of like capitalistic structures or whatever, like that word might be like dirty for some of us in crypto, but at the same time, it has a valid point in the sense that people should be, people should be doing business to earn in a way or like for their livelihoods. And like there has been lots of scenarios in communities that I've come across. Well, I mean, not just in crypto, but like volunteers are not getting paid or whatever, right? Like, like that's like that's important to make sure that we take care of our people, and
100%.
like and like I think it can look quite extractive if you're talking public goods, but then you're not paying your volunteers, right?
100%.
So like you know for us, we're as a project slash company, whatever, like we have been pretty bootstrapped until this time, and we actually genuinely think that if we were to never take VC money again, we actually think we would be able to basically make get funding from some on-chain mechanisms like Optimism and so on and so forth. The rate of competition for funding within crypto is becoming a little bit higher as well. So you have to now showcase what you've done, which is good. It's mature. It's making the space much more mature rather than here's some free money, go get it, right? But I think the money conversation is still really important to have because a lot of I'm seeing in the past year, especially because we're up against venture capital, is that either venture capital starts changing its metrics when it comes to wanting to invest in Web3, or we fundamentally actually try to reward projects that are either for good or have some form of a longevity or scalability through better like crypto mechanisms. Because a lot of projects have died in the past year, or they've stopped trying to fundraise because they can't close their round because they're up against AI, like, yeah.
I mean, like, two suggestions on that. I think if you're very clear of what problem you're solving and what kind of solution that you're actually offering to the world, and that is strong in your sense, and you have the product to do it, and even if it's research or product whatsoever, I think now the world, the normal world, the traditional funding world is also ready to support this kind of thing because they clearly see the future is coming. And so there's a lot of like other funds that are not particularly Web3, but I know Web3 funds are a little bit more closed mindset because they really experience that sweetness of like exiting really quickly. That's why there is a crypto fund. But our Web3, they've been here for a long enough time. They mature. Some new funds that are coming with a very innovative investment thesis, and you can find them. And also government has a lots of money. Also academia has a lots of money to support this kind of research. So I think it's not just the money, but like working with those traditional organizations that you can learn from each other. And that's another way that we're inviting them to our ecosystem. So I think that's one way to find funding. And two, if you're a community, if you're a DAO, if you are just a small group of people or volunteer organization or whatever, like people, you rely on the volunteer effort. If you have a living community, then you can actually issue token. then you can actually have your own economy, and you don't have to rely on grants. I mean, of course, to bootstrap and then to start off, and then some big implementation and then big investment is needed. And if you're open source, and yes, Optimism, Gitcoin, and there will be more funding like that will come up, like to support the public goods. So that's there, but eventually you also have to get out of that trap. Like you can't be just rely on the grants. You never know. It's really insecure, and it's kind of not guarantee the people's the effort. So if while you are having that grants and support, if you're focusing on building the healthy and living community, living organism, then you can issue token, and then that financial problem is done. You are not like able to issue token because you're not sure if we can actually keep that momentum, keep going up. But the community is alive, and you can do that. Even if it's small, even if it's big, you can still do that. And also you might find some surprise kind of like funding. For example, like in Pagoda, we were talking, okay, we had a two funder eventually to that event, but we don't want to be relying on that grants all the time. So we are actually doing our own pop-up venture. So we are experimenting with our own business model. Depends on like what people's interest is, and also the operators to make that happen. Like, as I said, we are just 3-month-old baby, and for 1 year till this organization or this group is walking, that you need a mother to feed. And one of our community member, and he's like, hey, by the way, I have like a basic income program that I personally contribute to the ecosystem. And why don't you two, which is like Catalyst, who's running the operating the whole group, you just actually get paid from that program, and the rest of funding can goes to the project initiative. Otherwise, a lot of money, whatever you raise, it goes to the operational and then the head cost, which is not much money left to do the project. So the magically it will fit, and some new funding mechanism, either that's the basic income model, they call it CBI, like a creative basic income. So they do like a 6 month and then do review, and then if you need more, then maybe continue or not. So it all kind of like ecosystem kind of feed you with a resource once you're very clear what you're solving and what you're doing. So I think every builder has to focusing on that and like fundamental thing, and then the resource will flow. And if you have no connection to those resources, then you reach out to other friends, and then they will connect you because they know, they understand, and they believe in your integrity and then the mission, right? I know it's like sounds like a little bit wishy-washy, but that's actually true. Is how even rich people operate in that level, right? They understand. Like I have seen a lot of in Instagram, oh, how did you make money? Like, oh, have you ever broke? And like those interview thing. And then people, most of people say like, yeah, I mean, if I were doing this by myself, I will only make 3 million, but now I'm making 300 million because I work together with others, right? So it's not a rocket science.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you're right. In a way, as soon as there is the one person that steps up and does something slightly differently, whether it's the example of Gitcoin, Optimism, public goods funding, but also UBI experiments, we just need more of those models to be able to replicate, because people, again, are very mimetic. And as soon as they see something working, it almost becomes an expectation. It's crazy to see how the Twitter sentiment, whenever something is actually a gift, like the Optimism grants, wasn't something that I saw coming as a kind of normal thing that happens in the industry. And now it's almost expected, and people are saying like, well, I should get more. Like, why is this happening? And so if you look at that in a positive light, these experiments do become almost like an expectation within the industry. And so if the rising tide of VC funded startups or protocols that are adding value become this thing that you do need to allocate some percentage to your community, because we do see the value of open source, and we start seeing the value of traditionally skills or tasks or things like community building that build not necessarily just financialized value, but other types of value for the community that can be net positive, we can start rewarding that, and that becomes more and more normalized. So definitely agree that one person or small examples or even small conversations like this can completely change the tide. And excited to see more of that. We are hitting the 1 hour and a half mark, so maybe kind of opening up the last question and seeing if there are any things that you're working on that would benefit from one person that can make a big change, or it's something that a project that you want to bring attention to, for anyone that might be listening.
Yeah, I think the invitation to that DevCon, I think I doubling down on the real IRL, like real, like human in person gatherings, and then that's what really made me and Iman to talk, right? That personal grabbing and sit down conversation, and you don't need much time. You have like 30 minutes of like a deep conversation and a focus and presence, and then you become loved one, and you would just gonna support each other big time. So there's a two thing I would like to share. One is gatherings, which is like experience design studio. What we believe in, again, like, oh, is this only Songyi can do? So we are not doing online facilitation. We only focus in offline. If we do online, there will be more business opportunity, but I know there's so many other online facilitator who can do better job than us. So we're focusing on offline alone, and then designing the transformative experience for dialogue groups, new community or new initiative to form, and then also teams that are remote and they actually never seen each other before. You'll be surprised how many teams are like that, and that I see that it's extremely important because most of the time the company fail because that human dynamic. So if you could actually prevent that challenging time in advance by just having those experience together and then be together and understand a little bit better, instead of just working online and jumping into business call right away, I think that would make huge impact. So that's what we're doing. And two is like the Pagoda, the Asia Gatherings, and also Alliance of the Asia Ecosystem Builder. And it's very exciting because we committed to actually bridging the global majority especially for DevCon. And we will be having a lot of GM related conversation. So if you want to have a real chat, and if any one of you guys, any listeners coming to Thailand in advance, like October, November, or from September, October, there is also other things happening in Korea and Malaysia. There's so many beautiful destinations. And if you ever come and your company or your projects are looking to work with Asian local entrepreneurs, so we have this product, the pop-up venture called Coordination as a Service. So it's a CAS, CAAS. And what it does is, instead of you spending your money, event budget to rooftop bar or like a crazy clubbing, we invited local social enterprise and then local enterprise and local business owners to be a vendor and help us creating beautiful carved experience for you, the Asian way. So you can actually open up your vision and you can actually impacting local economy with the money that you're spending. And that way, our local vendors and local entrepreneurs learning about Web3 and actually understanding about like who are these people by working together rather than us doing the lecture. This is Web3. This is who we are. This is what we're doing. So please open wallet. They will not do it unless they have to actually open a wallet to receive money. So that's how we do things. So if you ever need those kind of help, coordination, concierge or experience design, reaching out to me. I think that's very present to me right now. And any of this ecology, anthropology conversation in crypto space, welcoming you.
Yeah. Okay, we're joining. We're coming. This is great. Also, your website is absolutely beautiful. I really like it. It's really smooth.
Which one,
Well,
the pagoda?
Pagoda one, yeah, it's really smooth. I'm just like in the background looking at it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll add some links and so on in the on the YouTube clip. And And then also, like, I guess, shout out to Edge City as well. That's going to be happening in November for the whole month, right? In Chiang Mai. I believe they have a residency coming up. It's cool. Are you doing anything with those guys as well, or looking into doing something with them?
Yeah, so the cards will be the infrastructure layer for all of these friends coming, whether they
Great.
become a client or we are planning to open three things as an open source resource. Like one is a playbook that how you actually create human connection focused gatherings. Because like a lot
Yes.
of even this residency is, I oftentimes see that is it's too chaotic and not like intentional enough. So how can we then
Yes.
we do it in Asian way? And the second one is like a map of amazing places and different events that is happening in the Chiang Mai and Bangkok. So we're creating the version of it. And the third is actually the like a directory of a potential speaker and collaborator, because Thailand and in Asia we have a lot of interesting projects and academia and people who can share so much of wisdom, and a lot of this residency or people coming in to do the event, we want them to actually engage with the locals rather than just do their thing and then leave.
Yes.
Yeah, so we will have a bunch of people that are amazing at what they're doing in Thailand and in Asia, so they can actually reach out to these people, and then we can actually help to weaving that idea. So they could, for example, we have a lot of Burmese refugees in Thailand. I don't know if you're aware of what's happening in Burma. And now the whole world is looking at Israel and Gaza, but like Burma has their own issue for a long time, and it has not gotten better at all. And people beaten up on the street all the time, get killed, and there's so many things happening. So we wanted to actually have people who are actually researching around that and bringing maybe crypto technology to send some aid money to back to Myanmar and stuff like that. And we have other
Sure.
people who from the tribe, and so there's you know what I mean. Like, so those are the things that we are operating. So we're talking to all of them, and then also Pagoda is helping running the Funding the Commons residency in Chiang Mai and helping other residency. And so we become a host. We are like a mom kind of figure of Asia. So if you do anything in Asia, have questions, come to us, and we're happy to support.
Amazing.
EF team is there, but EF team is so busy with their
Yes.
event.
Yeah.
So we are like a backup, kind of like the hand holding partners.
Amazing. Amazing. Yeah, we're excited to come hang
Love
out.
that. Yeah. And we'll reach out. I think we can try to do something as well to support. And that's the thing. Whenever people do go to these cities for conferences, and we've had this conversation at these network state events, it is so important to weave into the local community. And so I'm glad that you guys are taking that responsibility and connecting. Because again, there is so much attention, there is so much value that we need to actually localize, and instead of just like renting out a rooftop and doing something, bring in a flavor and bring in kind of different elements that will spark moments of innovation and
Exactly.
do stuff on the ground that will create lasting change.
Yeah, for sure. That was really fun. Thank you so much. Yeah. Sorry, we took
Yeah.
up so much of your time.
Thank you so much for listening. And
Of
I just
course.
have so much to
Yeah.
share, and I have to actually, I'm using very basic English to just, that's easier for me. So sometimes I go around and around, but I hope the message
It's all good.
was heard from you guys. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, all the best with all the projects, and I think it would be quite cool to do like a follow-up with you in the next couple of months just to see how things are going. Yeah, it'll be fun.